What's up YouTube, it's the one and only Legend Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. Now for those out there who are completely unaware of the massive Woj bomb that has just been released, Chris Paul is headed to the Houston Rockets. He's going to play in the same backcourt with James Harden in a ridiculously massive trade that involves Houston and the Los Angeles Clippers. In this trade, Chris Paul and Chris Paul alone will go to the Houston Rockets, and in return, the Los Angeles Clippers will receive a massive amount of players, actually more assets than you see on this graphic right now. However, these are the more important assets. You get a Sam Dekker, a 2018 first round pick that is protected, Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, and Montrezl Harrell. And I actually believe that it's a pretty good haul for the Clippers, and I think that's good for the Houston Rockets, but I'm not completely sure, and I am going to talk about both teams. But first, let me talk about the Los Angeles Clippers and why exactly they made this trade. Me personally, I have had this sentiment about Chris Paul with the Los Angeles Clippers for quite a while now, and I actually made a video. Obviously, if you are a loyal subscriber and you watched the video, you clearly already seen it. However, just to get a quick overview on why exactly I felt like the Los Angeles Clippers should move on without Chris Paul is simply because of his age and the amount of money that he was going to be demanding. Chris Paul is at the age of 32, and he was looking for an offer from the Los Angeles Clippers with a max contract that is roughly around $200 million over the next 5 seasons. With that amount of money, it's ridiculous to even contemplate giving that to a player who's 32 years old, especially because it's not like he's a franchise player who has been on the team through thick and thin. It's one thing if you're going to give that to Dirk Nowitzki, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan. However, Chris Paul, realistically speaking, didn't even want to be in the Clippers. He just wanted to play in LA, and the Los Angeles Clippers are just a byproduct of the Los Angeles Lakers, and that's really it. Because of this, there is no real need to show him a level of loyalty that will put you in a financial deficit for years and years to come. And with this new flexibility that you have in your cap, you definitely have to look at your free agents, primarily Blake Griffin, and make a decision on what exactly you want to do moving forward. Again, I said this in a previous video, so I'll make sure I put a link in the description, and I'll make sure I put a little annotation or a card in the top right hand corner. But in that video, not only did I say move on from Chris Paul because of his age, but turn around and make Blake Griffin the face of the franchise. The Los Angeles Clippers is an organization that definitely needs an identity, and Blake Griffin, I feel like he's perfectly poised in that direction. And with that being said, I must admit before I move on that I've consistently questioned what exactly Doc Rivers is doing for this organization. I feel like this move is only being made because Jerry West has now been involved with the organization. From what it seems like, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, certain names that have always been around trade rumors over the last year or two, Doc Rivers has consistently turned them down with the idea that he's going to continuously bring back the exact same players every single year. And even though, yes, some of these players are fantastic, I believe Chris Paul will be a Hall of Famer. I think Blake Griffin, if he can stay healthy, can definitely be a game changer and potentially go back to the status that he once had. The problem with that is it obviously just does not work on the same court with one another. So if you have someone who's making the decisions in the organization and they not only bring back the same pieces every single season, but they're also willing to put themselves in a financial deficit that could definitely hurt them in the long haul and really don't change anything with the roster, I really do question what exactly Doc Rivers is doing for the organization, and it wouldn't surprise me sooner than later if he does get terminated. Now, moving on to the Houston Rockets and why exactly would they do this trade. Now, for most people on Twitter and everywhere else where they were reacting to this, I've seen a lot of people jump for joy and claim that the Houston Rockets are now a quote-unquote super team. Quite honestly, not trying to be that guy, but I don't really see how this team greatly benefited from this trade. Sure, they got Chris Paul, who is one of the better point guards in the NBA, like I said before, a future Hall of Famer. However, Chris Paul, James Harden in the backcourt with one another, along with Mike D'Antoni being the head coach, I just don't see how it's going to work. The way that Mike D'Antoni runs his offense is very heavy on pick and roll, which is why we saw James Harden statistically have the greatest season of his career. And if James Harden is continuously going to be the all-time point guard, or at least the dominant ball handler, does that mean that Chris Paul will be on the perimeter just shooting threes? And if so, I definitely believe that will be misrepresenting and misusing a talented player in Chris Paul. However, I am willing to give the decision makers of the Houston Rockets a little bit of leeway because of this reason and this reason only. Chris Paul, at the end of the day, because he opted in for only one more season, he's an expiring contract. So there's a huge possibility that the Houston Rockets move some pieces off to the side and got in return an expiring contract. Yes, he's a very quality player and he potentially could add some type of excitement to the team, but I do believe that they're just going to use Chris Paul as an expiring contract and shut off $20+ million in next year's offseason and make a run for some free agents that are better fit for the organization. A huge piece that they could add to the team that I would love to see for the organization is DeMarcus Cousins. DeMarcus Cousins, 6'10", 6'11", big man that can space the floor, so he definitely fits into the D'Antoni offense. He's extremely high motor offensively. He can do a little bit of everything. And on the defensive end, who really cares, because that's not what D'Antoni is concerned about either. Not only do you have DeMarcus Cousins, but also a very good shooting guard you can put right next to James Harden in the backcourt once Chris Paul leaves is Avery Bradley, who spaces the floor out, and depending on who you talk to, definitely not Chris Broussard, he plays at an elite level defensively and is an all defensive team player, so you got to respect him in that regard as well. So there could be a couple of more moves in the bigger picture that the Houston Rockets could potentially make. However, it may just take another year to transpire for us to see the full effect of this original trade. But before I specifically talk about Chris Paul, this idea that Carmelo Anthony or potentially even Paul George is going to join the team, I just don't see that happening. Carmelo Anthony and Mike D'Antoni have a history together that isn't necessarily the greatest, so I really don't think that would work out regardless if Chris Paul is playing in Houston. And then when it comes to Paul George, even though yes, I do think the fit would work in some regards, the Houston Rockets really don't have any more pieces or assets, especially after this trade, to go out there and to persuade the Indiana Pacers to give them Paul George. Unless there's a third team involved. However, again, I highly doubt that would happen, especially this deep into the offseason. And it seems like Indiana, especially the Celtics, are really pushing for something to happen within the next 3 to 4 days. And I highly doubt the Houston Rockets will be able to pull off something that quickly. But hey, I could be wrong. But I know what a lot of people are really concerned about is Chris Paul. And why exactly would he do this? Because almost on every single level, it just doesn't make any sense. For one, why would Chris Paul only opt in for one season? I understand he got to get his money. That's great. However, at Chris Paul's age, you would believe a 32-year-old point guard that only plays 60-some games in the regular season, you would believe that he would be much more enticed from an organization giving him a more stable contract, giving him 4 to 5 years rather than opting in for one more season, especially because you don't know what exactly will be available to you next year. Another thing I don't understand is, why would you go to the Houston Rockets? A lot of people peg Chris Paul as this guy that is willing and determined, he sacrifices, and he needs to win a championship. Houston Rockets, as great as they performed last season, shout out to Mike D'Antoni as a head coach who won Coach of the Year, shout out to James Harden who had a phenomenal season, shout out to the entire organization who has really turned things around last season, even with the absence of Dwight Howard. However, that team is not competing for a championship. That team is extremely far away in my eyes, and we have other organizations like the Minnesota Timberwolves and potentially other teams like the Boston Celtics making massive push forwards to compete in the NBA. Yeah, this move doesn't really make any sense for Chris Paul. He easily could have taken some type of pay cut to go play for the San Antonio Spurs or even the Minnesota Timberwolves. However, he purposely decided to go to the Houston Rockets, which again just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Also, if you're looking at a technical standpoint, I actually believe that Chris Paul will take the biggest hit when it comes to his numbers. And there's a possibility that he doesn't really care about that, and kudos to him. However, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chris Paul takes a massive hit in his assists and his points, because Chris Paul basically will be the guy that's standing in a corner or maybe coming off some screens and catch and shooting, which will really alter the way that he plays the game of basketball moving forward. But there is a very good chance, and I know a lot of people are tired of hearing this, but I'm going to keep pushing this narrative because this is the only really logical thing that makes sense right now. There's a very good chance that Chris Paul decides to opt in one more season in his contract, received the most amount of money, went to a state that has no state tax, just so he can receive as much money as he possibly can before he, D Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and LeBron James all get together, join the Banana Boat team, potentially take pay cuts, obviously, because you got to make it work out, and kind of end the rest of their careers all on the same team with one another. With all that being said, let me know in the comment section below what you think about this trade. Let me know what you think about Chris Paul and his legacy. And actually, I'm gonna make sure I put a poll in the top right hand corner, so make sure you click on the annotation and figure out, and you tell me, what do you think about Chris Paul legacy and where exactly he stands in all-time greatness? Because moves like this, definitely we're gonna go back and look at his career and trying to figure out what exactly he was doing if everything doesn't work out. But with all that being said, I will see you all later. Peace.